Danny is my name. At the age of 22, this was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. I work and live in New York City, and since I don't own a car, I mostly use the train to go around. On a Saturday evening. It was late at night, and I was headed home from a party. This was something I did roughly every other weekend, so I had no problem riding the train by myself at night. It was usually a little unsettling to descend the stairs and enter the subterranean without seeing another person. There was a great deal of close spacing between stations. I could almost feel like I was being watched or followed while I was walking, and sometimes I heard an echoing bang-like sound coming from somewhere. I waited on a bench because I was running late for the trains. I heard this same line, "Over here, buddy." It sounds like something out of a horror film. Someone was standing on the tunnel's tracks, sticking his head out to observe me. The man appeared to be unclean, possibly in his early 40s. He grinned at me, a terrible yellow smile that was missing at least 3 teeth. That much was evident even from my seated position. I tried not to give him any attention, but he persisted nonetheless. Inside the tunnel, there was laughter, and then the face of another repulsive-looking man protruded. The man grinned cruelly at me as well, then motioned for me to join them in the tunnel. But the way they looked at me, their eyes would not even twitch. They appeared to have their sights fixed on me. I went back to trying my best to ignore them and to wait for the train. Peering from my peripheral vision, I saw one of the men walk into the tunnel and come back a few moments later carrying a different face. I needed to take another look. Another face appeared, but it was lifeless and stooped down. One of the males appeared to be holding the man's face up. The sound of the train arriving relieved me of a ton of weight. I stood up, prepared to board the train, but the sight of what was approaching the edge of the platform almost made me throw up. The second man from the back was carrying a head in his hand as he and the other man made their way back down the tunnel. Just ahead, a head severed from its head. The train came to a stop and they vanished from view onto the tunnel side. With the intention of alerting the conductor as soon as we left the station, I got aboard the first car. I wished I could have stayed one more second. I noticed several legs going down the stairs to the platform as the train started to move, but that was all. I was unable to identify who it was. However, as the train entered the tunnels, I did manage to catch a glimpse of a group of males who were leaning on the railing just inches from the train window and staring directly at me. I screamed that there was an emergency as I banged on the conductor's door like a crazy person. He opened up, and I shared what I had observed. He radioed to the station's manager and another executive in the corporation, who I'm sure handled it or called the appropriate authorities or security, whatever. My stop took a long time to arrive, but when it did, I was so relieved that I had to nearly bounce in my walk. Since then, I have attended a party at the same friend's house once, but I did not go to that station. I made the decision that walking the additional distance to the next station was worthwhile. Strange occurrences in the train at night are not something I know frequently occur, but in my experience before this encounter, they never did. But in light of this event, I believe I should advise you to exercise utmost caution at night in secluded locations like subway stations. For 35 years, my father has managed subway stations under the MTA. Because a manager must be on duty at all times in this line of work, he has essentially worked every shift conceivable over his tenure. It implies that he has worked a sufficient number of nights. During the night, most trains were absolutely empty. He claimed that working the night shift had only one benefit. He has a number of strange and humorous tales from his night shift, but one is quite terrifying. My father had just boarded the train to relocate to a different station for his office. At approximately 3 in the morning, he was the only person on when he logged in. Someone got on at the following station. He's a tall, thin Caucasian man, according to my dad, with a beanie and a bulky jacket on. He glanced at my dad and then sat in the farthest corner from him. My father mentioned that he was uneasy because the man kept glancing up at him. My dad and the other man got off when their stops came. He proceeded to his office door, opened it, and peered over his shoulder. Just 50 feet away, the man with the jacket was pacing around. After entering his office, my dad locked the door and took a seat at his desk. After 5 minutes, someone attempted to turn the doorknob. The person on the other side of the door began to gently knock after realizing it was locked. "Who is it?" my dad yelled, and they said, "I want to talk." Whoever it was, he instructed them to leave. He claims that he could see problems coming. This station was usually vacant at this time of day, so he had a strong suspicion it was the guy from the train. The guy was instructed to leave by my dad. He kept knocking for over 5 minutes. When the security camera displays eventually appeared, my dad directed the camera at the door to his office. It turned out that the man with the beanie and jacket from the train was that guy. Interestingly, the man left as soon as my dad mentioned the camera. My dad spent roughly 30 minutes in that office doing whatever work he had to do before heading out to catch the next train. To make sure the strange man wasn't out there, he looked at the camera. After locking up, he down the stairs to the train platform and boarded the train without delay. He saw the guy from before going down the stairs to the platform and getting on the train into the same car as my dad through the window. He took a seat a few seats to the right on the other side. My father made an effort to avert his gaze and act as though he was unaware that the man was staring at him. At one point, in a sort of reconciliation attempt, he gave in and gazed back, grinning and nodding slightly before turning away once more. My dad never looked back at the man after the first time, even though he stared at him the entire ride to the next stop. You might be wondering why he didn't try to physically remove the guy from the situation. My dad has always been a total teddy bear, no bark, no bite, despite his massive stature. In addition, he claims that he was afraid the man was armed and that a single mistake may result in death. My dad virtually raced all the way back up to the streets as the train stopped at the station, looking over his shoulder the entire time. Yes, he was being followed by the man from the train. To try to get away, my dad had to locate the first public building that was still open. He discovered an open Wendy's and entered. He sat there and watched as the guy who was trailing him approached the window, paused, and gave my dad a 10-second look through the glass before he turned around and headed down the sidewalk and over the street. After eating and waiting for a little while longer, my dad stated he left Wendy's to head to his third and last station for the evening. What's the scariest aspect? The man from the train was pacing around the exterior of his office, which was barely 30 feet away, when my dad, in his paranoia, was checking the security cameras in his third office. Then he paused, turned to face the camera, and for at least a minute, my dad said, he just stood there, staring. Upon eventually lowering his head, he left the station and was never seen by my dad again. My father is unsure if he was followed after leaving Wendy's, although it would seem logical. The man was obviously disturbed, he might have been homeless, dangerous, or both, and it's unclear what he really wanted from my dad.